Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thanks so much for being with us today. For those of you who have been on some of the previous webinars that Dr. Stirk has provided, I want to say welcome back. Glad you were able to make it. This has been a really interesting series, and we're really excited about the direction this is going in. Dr. Amanda Stirk is our latest addition at Method Learning. After quite a few years in the college advising space, she is bringing her services to our realm, and we're really excited that she's able to provide her knowledge and her expertise to our clientele. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce Dr. Stirk, and she's going to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. So glad we've just been having such a great signage and people coming up and asking questions after these webinars. And so it's been a lot of fun doing them, and it's a topic, and I know I say this every time, it's another topic that I love discussing, because I really think as any family that's considering the college process, whether you're a freshman, a sophomore, junior, it's really changing sort of the dialogue between the student and the parent and the school and the family and the college. And so tonight I'm going to give you some really interesting insight on how to sort of approach college admissions in a much more holistic way. We've talked a lot about building your resume. We've talked about the different factors, academic and non-academic factors into college admissions. And so this is going to be really student personal. And so I really do hope, whether you're watching this on a replay or live, that you take this information, you go home, you have a conversation, and you really use this to sort of help you analyze each college in a very different way. So I think you're going to get a lot from this presentation on moving from can I get in to where will I be successful. And I see people are already logging on, which is fantastic. So I'm going to take just a quick poll. And what I'm going to ask you is, are you, and let me launch the poll here, are you a student, a parent, an educator, or an other? Again, I like just to know who I'm sort of talking to this evening. So if you can just take a minute. A little bit of everything tonight. That's fantastic. Great. Okay, we're still moving. So it looks like parents predominantly, but we do have some educators, which is fantastic. I always love when I can talk, and if you're an educator, you're definitely going to get a lot from this conversation. And then obviously, if you're a student, I'm really speaking to you. And so I want to make sure that you are well informed. So I'm going to just ask one more poll. So let me close that for a second. Great information. So just again, I'm going to launch what grade do you represent? So if you're a student, what grade are you in? If you're a parent, what grade is your student in? You can go with the oldest or the one that you're thinking about right now. If you're an educator, who do you sort of help the most, I guess? So just kind of, again, seeing the demographics I have here tonight. Okay, got a few 12th graders, fantastic. Mostly 11th graders, that's kind of the demographic of Method. A lot of people in that ECT and SAT, but definitely some 10th and 9th graders are showing up as well. That's fantastic, because I do think, again, having this information will really help you throughout the entire process. So I'll close that. Great, I love that. All right, so let's get started. So as Brian said, Dr. Stirk here. This is, I think, my third webinar, and we have one more coming up, and I'll be excited to share that one with you as well. Obviously, I have been a college consultant in college advising for many, many years. I'm a published author. We wrote College Unmazed with my two co-authors. I'm a blogger, I'm a writer, I do professional development, and I've been in the space and I absolutely love it. Hence why every topic is my favorite topic. So if you do have any questions at the bottom, my email is amanda@methodlearning.com. I've been getting some great questions even after the webinar. So if you do have a question throughout, feel free to put it in the chat and put in the questions. Brian does a great job at sort of saying, hey, we got a question, but you can put it in there if you have one for now, and if you think of it later, feel free to email me at amanda@methodlearning.com. All right, let's get started. So I think, whoops, I went too far. Sorry about that. So I want to sort of set the stage where college admissions is at today. And I think it's kind of a critical point in the sense that we're hearing a lot of different dialogue in the news about what's going on with college admissions, which has been a little crazy, obviously, since COVID. And so some of the things that we're seeing is looking at sort of the Common App, which is a very normal application. We're seeing an increase of students actually applying through the Common App. Now, again, the Common App is only 841 colleges. So it's a very small, select group of colleges that use the Common App, but applications are up. And what we're seeing is more students are applying to more colleges, where they used to maybe have 6 to 8 colleges on their list that they're applying to. We're seeing on average anywhere from 10 to 12. I've heard of some kids up to 20, which is a little crazy. I don't know if you saw the Louisiana story. A kid applied over to like 200 colleges and is trying to earn $10 million. I have thoughts on that. I'll leave that alone. But so we are seeing more students applying. So when we're looking at sort of these admission rates, it's not really accurate because it's just more students are having access to that application and they're putting their name in the hat because they're like, oh, let's see if Harvard will accept me, or let's see, you know, if I could go to the school. So we are seeing applications up. However, what we're seeing is actually a decrease in college enrollment. From 2019 to 2022, there's actually less than 1 million students than there were just 4 or 5 years ago. So over 1 million students have sort of got out of the pipeline of higher education. And that's really worrisome. So when we're talking about jobs and the jobs for the future, we have found, they track all this, this is research and data, that 65% of jobs today require some type of post-secondary degree. The problem is we're only about 53% of the nation has some type of post-secondary. So as students start, you know, not staying in college and more jobs are requiring it, there's going to be definitely a hole that we have to fill with these jobs. And the other thing to kind of go with that decrease of enrollment is that 41%, only 41% of students who start a 4-year or start in post-secondary education will actually graduate within 4 years. So if we're talking that means over 59% of students are actually either graduating, it takes longer than 4 years, or like the 1 million that are out of the pipeline are not completing at all. And so if we know degrees or, jobs require degrees and certificates, but yet we have it declining and more students are not completing, we actually have a bigger issue at hand. And we find that also when students do get post-secondary education, they have more salary, more income. It gives them more economic mobility. And so a person without a post-secondary education earns 75% less in their lifetime than a student that has an actual degree. And so I think those are just really interesting statistics. And I think one of the reasons is, again, why we're talking tonight is we're not focusing on the right aspects of college admissions. What we're typically seeing is this model. And we're going to come back to this graph. I have shown it in the academic and non-academic webinar. But what we look at is, can I get in, right? So these are my ACT and my SAT scores. This is my GPA. What are the chances of me getting in? And when we approach it from a very kind of minimal standpoint of just, can I get in and do my scores match? That's why we're having so fewer students actually completing college. And so what I, again, am sort of positing to you all is to go beyond just, can I get in, to where can I be the most successful? Where can I actually be my best self, find the career and the passion, and really build the skills that I need to be successful after I'm done with my 4-year degree. So this is, I had spoke to a student about a week or two ago. So I'm just using some of his colleges that he's starting to build a list. So we had a nice conversation, and I said, where are you interested? And so these were his colleges that he just sort of named that he's actually visited. And these aren't his test scores. I don't know. I just sort of inputted test scores. So you can see, again, hypothetically, the student has maybe a 1250 on the SAT, a 28 on the ACT. And so you see this line here shows sort of what the student's composite score is. And between the ACT and the SAT, where is he kind of falling in between that 25th and 75th percentile on the scores that they're accepting? And then we're also looking, if you look on the right-hand side and sort of the box, you'll see the percent admitted. So is it a harder school to get into and they're only accepting, 19%? Or are they accepting more students at 66%? So you can kind of look at this and say, okay, I see maybe one or two schools that, his chance of admissions might be pretty good, right? Just solely focused on this. And so what a lot of families do, and even a lot of independent counselors and school counselors, we say, okay, let's look at this list and we're going to say, what is your reach school? So and you can kind of look at obviously your bars here. Wesleyan and Ambassador are sort of, we would quote unquote call them a reach school, right? That you're really not meeting their requirements and the percent admitted is pretty low. And then we look at, okay, what's your match? So maybe we might put Marist, and so we also might throw in maybe UMass Amherst. And so we're kind of looking at that, and we would say, is there any schools that he has on this list that he's above their requirements? And right now, there's not. And so what I would really implore you as parents, as students, as counselors and educators, is to stop using reach, match, safety. And I'm going to explain that throughout this presentation, why that's sort of disempowering to students to just say, only my grades and only my test scores are what's going to get me in, and what else can I do, and how can I take advantage of where I need to go. So we're going to come back to this in here in a little bit. So through that process, what he's going through is something we call LEADS. And so LEADS is just an acronym for the steps that you need to go to do through the college process. I'm not going to go through all the steps tonight. That's another conversation at another time. But where this particular student is just really building his list. He's looking at colleges. He's sort of thinking of where does he want to go. And so what I really want you to think about is, let's say you do have a list that you're starting. It could be 20 schools, it could be 5 schools, it could be 10 schools. Doesn't really matter, but you need to start with a list. And you need to now figure out, how do I explore those colleges, ask more questions, and really figure out if it's a school that I want to apply to. Once I apply, I get my decision back. And let's say he gets 4 out of the 5 schools, come back as a yes and an admitted. Then how do I make that decision? And how do I make sure I use my college support network and the people around me to help me make that decision so it's a good decision? And then lastly, how do I actually develop a plan to be successful? Because again, you don't want to be the student, the 59% of students that don't complete a degree within 4 years. So you really want to go into it saying, I'm going to be successful all the way through. So let's move on. So
hey,
what
Amanda,
I want you to, yes.
Amanda, hey, before you go too far, we do have a question about, and I don't know if we want to sidetrack it too much, but about whether you can determine whether test optional really means test optional.
Yes, and I'm going to actually show you that exact thing. So if you wait just a little bit, I will show you that. So please hold that question, and I will specifically show you how we can determine that, okay? Great question, thank you. Was there any other, Brian?
Nope, that's it for right now.
Perfect, awesome. Thank you, Michael. Okay, so I want you to look at this picture and, Gestalt psychology, right? So you're looking at this, and when we see it, the question is, what do you see, right? So you can just kind of raise your hand. So maybe who saw like the vase, the black first? And then who saw the faces first? So a lot of times when we look at colleges, it's very common for somebody to see a vase and somebody else completely different to see the faces. And what happens a lot of times in families, parents with their student, there's a generational gap, right? There's a difference of about, anywhere from 30 to 40 years typically. Things change in college admissions. And so the student might be looking at the vase and the parent is looking at the face. Same with the counselor, same with the people that you're talking to. And so what I'm going to be showing you, called the 6 keys of college fit, it allows a deeper conversation so I can understand, oh, my parent sees the vase and I see the face, and now we can have a conversation about that difference. So we can actually talk about what's important and why we see it the way that we see. And that's where I think predominantly the stress comes from, is because there's sort of that discongruence between how I see college as a parent and how my child sees college. And a lot of times it's even interesting, again, for the educators on, we have a lot of biases that come sort of into this, or, oh, I had a student that went there, a really good student, and they weren't successful, so I don't know. Or, oh, I had a really, a good student, and it's a great school because that one student was successful. And that's not always the case. And so sometimes we do have to check our own biases at the door and say, again, how are we looking at the same college? So it's very common to sort of have the two different perspectives. So what I would like to do, scooch one more, is, as I said, kind of add to the conversation. So there's a lot of times in college admissions, we talk about something called fit. And when we started writing College Unmazed, we didn't like the word fit. Well, we like the word fit, but there was no way to really sort of quantify it or sort of discuss what does fit mean to each student. So we went through very thoroughly at all the data and the research and the information that's out there. And we said, how can a student approach the college admissions process and how to choose a college to apply to in a different way? And so when we looked at the information that was there, what we said is we really needed students and parents and counselors to be able to discuss what fit actually means to each student. So if I'm a low income minority student, I might be much more focused on how much is it going to cost me to go to college. Somebody that can just write the check as a parent, financial match might not be the most important thing, and where can I get in and what has the highest academic match might be that. Or maybe I'm a teacher or a nurse, and what I want to care about is when I get out of this major, that I'm guaranteed a job, and so maybe I want more career match opportunities. Or if I'm going to go on to graduate school, does that college sort of create that sequence and that career pathway for internships, study abroad, alumni networks, things that I can tap into? And so the list is, and we're going to go over the list kind of specifically and different sort of data points that you as a family can look at to sort of help you determine this. So we have academic match, career match, financial match, personal match, student outcomes, and student support. And it's perfectly okay for a student to gravitate towards, like I said, one or another. It just depends, again, on what that student is. But if we can sort of know where our values and our fit is coming from, again, we're going to have much more robust conversations. So let's break it down a little bit more and see what are some different aspects under each of the 6 keys of college fit. So you can see here is just a graph, and we're going to go through most of them. So we're going to be on the slide for a little while. And so these are all, and so some of the things you can find pretty readily available on different websites and through different sort of data that the colleges provide. But there are some things that are going to be somewhat subjective, that when you go visit, or when you talk to college admissions, or when you look through all the materials, or you visit the college's website, or you talk to college admissions when they come to a college fair. So some of those you're going to sort of have to rank because there's no clear, number or sort of statistic that's going to help you. And what I really implore you to do is to remove some of, especially at this stage, like, hey, I'm building my list and I want to explore colleges, to remove some of the emotion behind it, right? That's really hard to do, but you don't want to fall in love with a school that you're not going to be able to get into. And so we really try to remove as much emotion so you can be a little bit more of a critical thinker early on. And then once you get admitted and you're looking at your list, then that's when we have you bring in the emotion. So what do you actually really feel more home? So you're going to see we really try to remove some of that from the conversation at the very beginning, because it can limit a student from not seeing other good choices and just solely focusing on maybe one or two colleges that might be a little too difficult. So let's look at academic match. So there's lots of different things. Academic match is probably some of the easiest things to find sort of data and statistics on, but what type of college is it? What are the scores they require? What GPA do they normally take? Selectivity, how hard is it to get in? How big the classes are, so student to faculty ratio, program size and availability, which is really key. There's a lot of times where it might be a super small program that you're interested in, and that might be okay, or you want a bigger program. Different degrees offered. So are you looking for a certificate, an associate's, a 4-year degree? Do you want to do like a 4+1 type of program? So what type of degrees? Maybe you want to go all the way to a MD or a DO program or a law school. Again, what do they have? And then what's becoming more popular is class modalities. So can I take classes online? Can I do weekend classes? Can I, do it in mix and match? And so we're seeing a lot more students engaging in that. And we are seeing schools get creative about offering more like online programs. Like I'm in Florida. So the University of Florida has this program called PACE where they're like, hey, you can do your first 60 credits online, be a quote unquote UF student, and then once you get to your 60 credits, then you can come on campus and be a full-time student. Now you can live up here, you just can't live in the dorms. So sometimes they might offer a different program like that. Personal match, so this is again what the student is sort of looking for. That could include location. Is it a special mission school like a historically Black college? Maybe part of the colleges that changed lives. Maybe it's a tribal college. So is there something that you're kind of looking for that has a unique mission or focus? How big of a school it is, if it has a religious affiliation, diversity. For a lot of students, diversity is a real key thing. Both ways. I'm from Iowa, so they had to work really hard to recruit students from of a diverse background to come to our universities. Institution type, so do you want private, public, things like that. And then we have recreational options. So what's available? What can you do off campus, on campus? And then living arrangements, dorms, food, etc. Student support, I really implore you to think about student support much, much more than families do. The truth is 1 in 4 adults are going to have a mental health crisis in their life. And there's going to be a class or there's going to be something that they are either going to have a mental health issue, they're going to have a health issue, they're going to need help in a class and they need tutoring help. And we don't spend enough time researching what type of support services do they have for my student. I have a student right now that I've worked with for the past year, and she has a 504 plan for extra time, some accommodations, and she's finding, she took some dual enrollment classes, that it was a little overwhelming to have so many classes and juggle it all. And so we really talked about the colleges on her list. What were the percentage of students that are using the disability or adaptive services office? And how does that process actually work? Because we want her, if she's successfully using her accommodations as a high school student, what does she need to do to get those accommodations under what we call the ADA. So IDA is the federal law for K-12 program. ADA is for higher ed. And so those are really important. So, and then counseling, one of the things I always ask, and I don't know, my child may or may not need it, the stress and everything going on, she might need it, or your child might need mental health services. What's the wait to get in? Sometimes it's up to a month or 6 weeks. And if my child needs help, I want to make sure my child, because they're not always calling mom and dad and telling us, that they have access and it's a welcoming environment for them. And like I said, tutoring services, academic labs, and then other recreational community service. Student outcomes is another area that I don't think we talk enough about. And those are things like your graduation rate. So like I said, 41% graduate within 4 years. So at that college, how many students are graduating on time? And if it's low, I want to know why. I want to know why. I had a family, it was sort of a friend of a friend, and they asked me to do a favor just to talk with this mom. And it was kind of a last minute, student got in to do athletics. And I looked at the graduation rate and it was like 15%. And they were literally going to spend like $45,000 a year for this private school. I won't even say where or what. And the student really didn't want to go to college. That wasn't her plan at all. Just this kind of came up. And I said, but this graduation is so low. Have you asked them why and what are they doing to fix it? So there's something definitely to find out. Retention rate. So from freshman to sophomore year, how many students actually stay? When it's low, that kind of tells you something about the college culture and that why aren't students feeling at home? So a lot of times when I show you some of the data and how to find it, these are the questions to start asking. So why? And when you go to a college visit, instead of just being like an absorber of information, like, oh, this is great. Remember, it's a marketing tool, right? And so they're like, oh, look at this brand new dorms, but you really won't live here. You're going to live in these old cruddy dorms, right? But instead of just saying like, so what's your ACT, SAT scores you require? I saw your retention rates at a 25%, or it'd be higher than that, say like 80%. Why are 1 in 5 of your students not coming back sophomore year? What do you think the issue is? That's a great question, right? Alumni salary, so how much am I on average going to earn after I graduate, which is really important for parents and students. We love you kids, but we don't necessarily want you to come back. We want you to be happy and healthy and have this be a good investment. So we want you to have a good salary. And loan default rate, this is the one that we don't talk a lot about. And that's basically how many students took out a college loan and weren't able to pay it back. And so that tells us something. So even their loans are sort of inflated, meaning that it wasn't as high of a return on investment as you would hope it to be. And their students or their graduates aren't earning enough to pay back that degree. So that's a sort of a cause for concern and something that you definitely want to look at. Median earnings after 10 years, and then the median debt, like how much debt are average students sort of coming out. So those are all student outcomes. So after you kind of leave, what does it look like? The other two, financial match, career match. So financial match is obviously, can I afford to go here? Even with loans, and hopefully we want to not ignore, but we hopefully don't have to take out loans, right? And I will say, I'll give you a precursor, next in 2 weeks, we're all talking about money. We're going to dive into financial match a lot. So you definitely want to come back and listen to that because we're going to dive into all of those things in 2 weeks. So, how much aid does each student earn on average? And what's the percentage of students earning that aid? Do they only give merit aid or do they only give financial need-based aid? And we can find out that information even before you apply. So what's your net price based on income? So a lot of families say, oh, well, I make too much. Well, let's look, how much do you make? And they actually break it down. If you make over 200,000, this is the average sort of net price. If you're under 100,000, it's this much, 50,000, so forth. In-state, out-of-state, and then different living arrangements if I live on and off campus. And lastly, career match. So what is the college going to actively do to make sure that I can get a job after I graduate? So as part of that student outcomes, right? So what's the network, the alumni network I can tap into? What mentoring opportunities are there? What internships are available? What are some career placement or work study opportunities that I could have? So what can I start doing right now and that the college will help me with so that I'm ready to be prepared? It was interesting. My niece is in med school. She's at the University of Michigan. And one of her friends, they came down here to Florida to have kind of a spring break week before they went off. One went to the University of Iowa, my niece, and the other girl, she went to Emory. And it was really interesting hearing from a public, four-year public, pretty large institution, to Emory being, a small private, how different they approach their graduate degree processes. Completely different. My niece was completely on her own, had to do everything, got very little help, and the help that she kind of got wasn't really accurate. And, on the other hand, who went to Emory, it was like step by step, did everything, and it completely different experience. And so those are good things to sort of ask, because you don't want to get to the end and not be supported. So I'm going to take a minute there. If you have a question, throw it in, but I do have another poll, and I want to know what value, so one of these fits, do you find most important? I will say the system would only let me put 5 in. I know there's 6, so I put 2 together. Apologies. I do know that happened. So the poll's open. So looking at these, based on you, just what you think, what do you think would be the most important for you? I'm going to take a drink of water really quickly. Wow. Okay. These are really surprising. These are great. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Interesting. I've never asked this question before, so this is kind of fun to be able to do this poll. So 37% said academic match was the most important. And then next came personal match. And I don't know, it sounds like career match, student support were probably, maybe it was 5 and 5 or whatever, and then financial match was lower, student outcomes, and career match. So really interesting. So I think that's very helpful. And what I think is interesting, this changes, right? So when you're thinking about where do I apply, you might be focusing on different things. And so what we do in our College Amaze workbook is we actually have you rate this twice. Once when you go, as you're exploring colleges, and then do it again once you're actually admitted to the college. Because now once you have your award letters, you know that you're admitted, it's a very different game. And maybe what wasn't as important before becomes more important because you've learned more and you've changed more. And so that's really sort of, could be more critical at different points. But I think that's very interesting. So let me close this poll here. So one of the things I do, so in the College Amaze workbook, we just have students rank, we add them up and they do kind of a ranking system, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They add up their points and they kind of see kind of what you did. So which one sort of fit me the best. For method learning, we took it a step further and we actually do something, whoever we do college advising with, we actually go through this process with the students and with the parents, and we look at, and we have them do a separate report, one for students, one for parents, and we do something called the Family Values and Fit Diagnostic. And so we look at this and we say, okay, what do you, out of those, each of those little attributes, what do you find most important? Why? We have the parents do the same thing, and it's a really great discussion point to say, look at this report, look at what you're sort of interested in, and then let's start building a list off of that. So just wanted to kind of share, that's one of the really cool diagnostics that I've never seen anywhere else. And I think it's a really great added feature to what we're doing through our college advising. So there's some other considerations, and I don't want to ignore some of the other things to consider. I'm not going to spend a long time with them because I think we know them. Obviously prestige. So again, it still is important. Can I get in? And what's the name of the school? But it's not always. When you actually look at the research and you look at Frank Bruni's work, and really selectivity is actually not the #1 criteria of the student's success. It's the student themselves. And so students can be very successful being at a traditional 4-year public and then going on, for graduate degree and whatnot. But for some families, the prestige is really important, especially if you're alumni and you really know the area and it really matches what you're doing. So one of the things to sort of ask as a family, how important is selectivity to you, and sort of having what we would consider that name brand college, and why is that the case? Because that's completely natural and normal, but there's still a lot of good options that don't have the sort of prestige behind it. And then I talked a little bit already about sort of the marketing. I don't know about you. I'll pick one up over here. It's fun when I get my daughter, she's a sophomore, rising junior, and we're starting to get stuff, and I get these little like flyers all the time and the marketing things. And this is Ohio State. I think we just got it this week. And oh, everyone looks so happy. And somebody's scuba diving. And I'm sorry, I don't know what you're scuba diving in Ohio. So I wonder where that's taken. But it looks like a lot of fun. But this is a marketing tool, right? And so whether you go visit, and if you go visit, you're going to find the upbeat, perky person that's super knowledgeable and, a really good student. So they hand select who's going to show you around campus, right? And they have a spiel that they're going to have. And when they pick pictures for marketing, they're going to put the best pictures of the campus and what it looks like. And so you want to sort of at least kind of tease that out a little bit to what's real and what is sort of marketing, and does sort of, when you pull behind the curtain, are you getting the value and it's not just a pretty brochure. So that's important. And then obviously cost is another consideration, what we can consider under financial match, but really digging into that and what's the difference between, net price, sticker price. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in 2 weeks. So not going to spend a long time on this, but this just kind of shows you the different types of selectivity. What's interesting is, there's over 4,000, colleges in the United States, and more than half are either open access or accept, 75% of applicants. And so open access are mostly community colleges or state colleges, but there's a lot of 4-year degrees or 4-year universities that, accept 75, 80%. And then you start getting more selective, and, as I mentioned earlier, as more people apply, they still have the same number of seats. It's just more people are applying. So then all of a sudden it becomes more and more highly selective because just more people, are applying, but it's the same numbers it was what they accepted 20 years ago. It's just instead of, 10,000 applicants, they now have 80,000 applicants, right? But fewer than 100 colleges are highly selective, which means they accept less than 35%. So that's really not the norm. The norm is more sort of in the middle. That's sort of, 50 to 60, 50 to 100% acceptance is more of the norm than the highly selectives. So I'm going to break down, and I know it's not super clear. I was copying and making it big. So this is something called the College Data Organizer, and it's a document that we actually have and we use in the College Unmazed workbook, and I use it in my college advising. But what I do in college advising under method is I teach students and their families how to actually navigate this information and how to look at it subjectively, objectively, and really internalize, what does this mean for me? So I'm just going to show you 2 keys and that are sort of the most important. Most of you said academic match and financial match. I didn't put personal match on here, but I did put academic and financial. But here is some information that when I input this into this Excel sheet that we have, basically any college, anybody that sort of sends their information into a system called IPEDS, which is the big federal database of data of all the colleges, and they have to answer these questions. So tell us, what type of degrees do you offer? What's your institution type? How many are admitted? So all this information's here. So one of the things though we've done that you will never, I have not found it anywhere else, is if we've connected each of those to a key. So if you said, hey, academic match is really important, this is going to be something you're really going to pay attention to, right? So let's just kind of go through. So again, using the same list that I had before. So now we're looking at the student's 5 colleges that he was interested in. We have it so it's color coded based on the list that you have. And the green is sort of pro student, meaning it's, you know, green for lower test scores mean it's going to be easier for that student to get in. Yellow is going to mean it's going to be harder, and white's just sort of in the middle. So if I added a 6th school, all the colors will change because your list changes. Or if you're all in highly selectives, your list is going to change versus somebody else going into you know, public universities or whatever. And so here's just some information. So now by a click of a button, adding this in, you're now adding a lot of information. So, and we've talked about some of these, so I won't go on, you know, on and on, but here it's like, you know, what degrees do you offer? Is it fully online? Is there any weekend or evening options? Student to faculty ratio, percent admitted. And so this was the question I believe Michael asked. What fantastic question, Michael. You asked, how do we know, do they use test scores? So in this list, when you look at percent admitted, let me see who enroll. So here where it's this person, whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to click on that. I'm clicking on it like it's an Excel sheet, but it's not. So it says percent submitting SAT scores. So it's this first green, yellow, white, this line here, if you can look at that. That is the college saying out of people that enrolled, so they were admitted and they enrolled with us, how many actually submitted test scores, and then what were those test scores. So if I look, and you can see SAT and then ACT is on here as well. So you can see here we have 21% submitted, 51%, 31, 26, 34. So the colleges that this student had picked is actually relatively low and much more of a holistic. So that's why it's going to be even more important to go to those academic and those non-academic factors. And I talked about those in the first webinar, and really look at the common data set and say, okay, if they are looking at test scores, or they're not as much looking at them, but they're somewhat important, but not that much, what other factors are they looking at? Okay, and I'll actually show you, if I get time, I'll show you the Excel sheet that I had made for this student. And so you can say, not super important. And so this is where, again, if I were going on campus, that's a great data point to bring up to the admissions. You know, I see 21%, and you had an ACT, so say 26%. Submitted test scores, you know, what are your suggestions that I should do? And typically they're saying, you know, if you fall within this range, the, you know, for this student would be, you know, 583, 613. If you fall within that, be better, more advantageous to submit them. If you're not, then it looks like it's not really going to hurt you to not submit them. So that gives you a lot of really sort of good information. Now, again, it's going to be that some of this information you're going to have to sort of figure out as you explore your colleges. Like I said, you go visit, you do those things. You want to add some of your own statistics and own numbers sort of in and compare them later. So let me go. I do see some questions. What's the sticker price? Jose, really great question. I'm going to actually go to the next slide and answer that question for you. Where can students explore all those characteristics? That's a really great question. So it's a document that we use in our college advising program. It's an Excel sheet, and it brings in what you're seeing here is literally tens of thousands of lines of data. And so we've done it and we've organized it. Now, other things like College Navigator, the College Board, there's other places that you can find some of this information. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't match to a key. So they don't know, like, oh, this meets my academic match. Oh, this meets my financial match. They just kind of throw it at the student and they have to sort of try to figure it out. But we really like this sort of comparison chart that we have. And what is the database? So that's a great question, Michael. So this comes from what we call IPEDS. It's like Institutional Post-Education Data System, or don't quote me on that, something like that. IPEDS, IPEDS. So great questions. I love them. You guys must be data people, which is my favorite people. So this is, oh, student outcomes. Did I do financial? Oh, I didn't. I'm sorry. I thought I had done financial. That's all right. So student outcomes. So here was, again, some opportunities, because I want to know if I'm going to go to the school, what are some things. So looking at this, so, you know, Marist might be easier to get into, but not as many people are staying. 86% still pretty high, but it might be a question, why is 14% not staying? And it has one of the lowest degree completions of a lot of the colleges. So I want to know a little bit more about what are they doing about getting kids graduated on time. What does the college culture look like? Why are kids maybe not staying as much as maybe some of the other universities? And so that would be something I would definitely, when I go to visit, I would be a little critical on. I would look and I would try to kind of figure out, and that's what this yellow, and this yellow doesn't indicate that this should be crossed off your list. And it's one of the reasons we didn't put red on there, because you should never exclude somebody, you know, right? But it's a way to ask more questions, right? So like, if other students aren't being as successful here as some of the other schools I'm interested in, why is that? And sometimes they take a wider group of students, and maybe their academic abilities aren't as high. So say like a community college, or sometimes like a historically Black college, they have a lot of times lower completion rates because they have a wider, they go deeper into, you know, what your test scores are. You know, they allow more of a holistic review, and so they're not just so test score driven. Now, if you have to have a 1550 to get into a university, I would expect you to be 95% are completing on time and are graduating, right? Because you're only taking the top of the top. And so we also don't want to minimize a school because they are offering greater admissions to more students based on their academics. So here we're also looking at cohort default rate. So how many people are defaulting kind of on their loans, median salaries. Again, it's all right there. So what's kind of the average? So looking at this, so while they might not be graduating as much on time, they're one of the top in terms of median earnings. So that's pretty good, right? So if you are completing, you're more likely to actually earn more money comparatively to some other colleges. And debt, but it does have a higher debt ratio comparatively to some of the other colleges. So again, just things to look for and to sort of pay attention to. There are some statistics that aren't through IPED, so we can't just automatically populate this. So again, we kind of say, hey, go look for this. When I do it for students, I do a lot of it for them. So I help them go find it, and we can talk about it as well. So we had the question about sticker price. So I want to make sure to answer that. So there's two different costs that you see. So the biggest cost that you see is something called the cost of attendance. So cost of attendance includes tuition, room and board, and then it also includes like expenses. So they kind of estimate like how much would books cost, how much would transportation cost, how much would some fees and stuff cost. So they give you an estimate. So that can be anywhere from 22,000 to 60,000, right? But sticker price, or what we call net price, is going to be the difference of the scholarship aid or grants and the money that either the college gives you, the federal government gives you, maybe outside scholarships. So minus all that extra stuff that people give you either for free or you got to pay back later. And then your final is what we call the net price, or sort of that sticker price. So what's actually, so what are you actually paying at the end, right? So we want to be cautious that we are, while the cost of attendance is important, most people don't pay that. Actually, only 1 in 10 families pay full price. So 9 out of 10 families actually pay a reduced price. And like I said, in 2 weeks, we're really going to dive into that even more. And I'm going to show you, you can look at the percentage of how many students at that college actually gets aid. At some colleges, it's 99% that they give everybody a scholarship, right? And we'll talk about it. And then what's the average of that? And then how can I get more money, right, at the end of the day? So, so this is just an example of ways to sort of look at this information and sort of critically say, okay, I got more questions. Here's some questions that I have. So when we go into it, and like I said, when we go into exploring our colleges, doing all the research that we need to do, this just makes you a little bit more informed on, hey, can I be successful here? Are the students that came before me being successful? And if not, why? What's this college doing about it? So all of a sudden, besides just looking at what are my test scores and what are my grades and can I get into the school, now we're having, like I said, a much deeper conversation. And so it's still important. Like, we still want to see our test scores and we still want to see GPA and all of that. So what we have a student do is something called, we call it the 3x3. And the 3x3 meshes, does the college fit me on my 6 keys of college fit? So I'm looking at academic match, financial match, student outcomes, you know, all 6 of them. I'm now going to rate each college, aside from am I going to get in, right, and the chance of admissions, but on all those other things, what do I think? You know, and this is, again, a conversation between parents and students and the school and so forth. And so I look at, is it a high fit, a moderate fit, or a low fit based on the 6 keys of college fit? And then I look at chance of admissions and I say, okay, based on, you know, what their sort of average is, what they're looking for in a student, my academic and non-academic factors, I'm going to rate my chance of admissions. Do I feel like I have a high chance of admissions, a moderate chance of admissions, or a low chance of admissions? Now, it could be just a low chance because for everybody it's a low chance because of the selectivity, right, of it. And so we bring those two together and we then sort of analyze, and we kind of put each school in sort of a box, right? So if it's a moderate fit and a moderate chance of admissions, and I just sort of made this up, I don't know if these are his fit or not. So I put these sort of, you know, moderate chance of admissions, but we said, you know, one is a high fit, but there's a low chance of admissions, but yet I liked it. And then one I thought was, you know, 2 were the best fit, but I don't really know if I'm going to get in and I'm pretty far away from their admissions. So one of the things that I would go back to the student is I would say, you know what, you don't have that many schools that are high fits, and you really don't have a nice breadth of, you know, chance of admission, so high, moderate, low. So let's go back and maybe enhance your college list a little bit more. So but what this is showing me that there are 3 schools that are very similar. So looking at size, looking at institution type. And so now we're kind of seeing what's working for the student, and we can have a better conversation about who and you know, who do we actually want to add to this list and continue exploring, and what's not working so much. So we can say, why is, you know, UMass Amherst not a good overall fit for you? And it's just moderate. And so we're going to go back and we're going to keep doing this until we find that we have a nice base. But why this is different than reach, match, safety is because we're adding in a whole other layer of empowering the student to look at, can I be successful here and can I be who I need to be, both right now as a freshman and when I graduate, and the loans I'm considering taking out, and everything else. And so it really just deepens that conversation so much more than just saying, can I get in? And so I think this is really an impactful way to look at it. And like I said, I would come back to this, and instead of chance of admissions, once they're quote unquote admitted, then we talk about desirability. So that's sort of that emotion piece, right? Did I like that they had a lazy river? That I like their food choices, or I like their dorms? I'll give you an example. I worked with a student for almost 4 years. She had a really unique background. She was actually at a very competitive private school locally, and she became the top junior handler in the Westminster dog show world, and she was traveling all over the country showing her dog. And I remember we were building her college list, and we were pretty far into it, and she said, I have to take my dog. And I mean, this dog has traveled with her literally tens of thousands of miles, right? And she's showing it all over and won blue ribbons, and she wrote a book. She wrote a children's book on it. She's a great kid. And I said, what do you mean you need to take your dog? She's like, I'm not leaving it at home. I'm taking my dog. And I said, well, okay. A lot of the schools that are on your list, you have to live in your dorms your freshman year. And so we need to look at a different list, because if you need to live off campus, because most don't let you take a service animal. So let's look into that. So we had built this list, and all of a sudden something that became really important to her that she didn't mention early in the process became more important. And so again, the reason I share that is because you as a student and as a family, things shift and change. And so just realize that this is a flexible list, but it will definitely help you sort of get through the process. So let me see here. So that is kind of the end of it. Again, I think there's a lot of information I gave you. Hopefully it's interesting, and I do have a minute or two here. I'll show you the quick Excel sheet. I do want to mention we are going to be starting our new live group college advising courses starting on May 14th. I'm super excited. We're getting a phenomenal response to these courses, so they're going to fill up quickly. And what's great is if you can't make it live, the student's going to get the recording, but it's going to be a way to really start working on those college documents right away. And so the group class, you basically are learning some general information, and then we pair those with one-on-one classes. So just like, here's your college data organizer, now let's talk about it. And then how do we make it your list, and how do we build on that? So we're going to be talking about building your college list. We're going to be working and actually completing a college resume. We're going to be working on and writing the college essay. We're going to be looking at admissions and deadlines. So how do we maximize early admissions, all of that, early decision, and when do we need to get everything in by? And then we're also going to develop a scholarship plan and looking at institutional aid, outside aid, and all the different ways to reduce that cost. And so we have 3 different packages, and I will put, if you look into the handouts, I do have 2 handouts that has this little flyer, and then it also has the different packages. Basically, the packages, you just get more one-on-one. The more selective you go with, the more supplementals, the higher the package, just there's more support that you need. So if you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to me. And let me click here. So you can actually meet with me if you have any specific questions. Just QR code, sorry, QR code that lets me and get on my calendar. It fills up very quickly. And then next Tuesday, or 2 Tuesdays, we're going to be talking about money. So I know it was Jose, you had some class or questions about financial aid and costs and everything else. Great one to come. Every family should come listen to that. And then I just started creating the college admissions newsletter that's going out every 2 weeks. If you're signed up for this, I'm going to just kind of automatically put you on there. But if there's anything or questions that you have for me, definitely let me know. So the question, Jim, great question. Are these classes just for students? No, I really suggest for parents and students. And what's going to happen, like I said, you have the live version, but you also have the recording. So what's going to happen is all the parents are going to get the recording, and they're also going to get a follow-up specific email of what the topic was. So if you don't have time to watch the recording, you can do like the little, what were those called? The little notes, Spark Notes, right? You can have the little outline so you know exactly. And there are things that we say, hey, as a family, you need to talk about this, because they need to understand your perspective, where you're coming from. So you will definitely get and stay up to date with those classes as well. So really great questions. So let's see, do you have any other questions? Oh, Jose had a really great question. Do you have trainings for school counselors? Yes. We have a whole curriculum that walks schools through this entire process. Everything I showed you tonight is all in our book and our curriculum. And we also do professional development. We come out, I have 2 co-authors that, I mean, they are research gurus of college and career readiness. And they've been doing this for, I think between the 3 of us, we have over 85 years of experience. And so we love coming out, talking with schools as a holistic approach, like a school-wide approach, but also a school counselor. So we would love to come really talk about this. And thank you, Jose, if you're a school counselor, thank you for the work that you do, because we can't do what we do without you. And I used to be a school counselor, so I'm super passionate about giving you guys the resources to do that. So great question. Did I get all those questions? You're welcome, Michael. Thank you. I think we're it. I went over. I'm sorry, but thank you all.
No, it was
It's
well worth it.
normal.
Thanks so much, Amanda. This was a great session again, and thanks for everybody for attending. We certainly enjoyed having you on, and there will be more in the future, so keep an eye out. Amanda's sending out pretty regular communications, try to keep in touch and make sure that you understand and that you're informed when future sessions are coming. So definitely keep an eye out for that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Amanda.